The Andy Griffith Show was more than just a sitcom. It was a reflection of a kinder, simpler world. With hearty laughter, heartfelt lessons, and the charm of Mayberry, it carved a permanent place in the hearts of millions. But as the years quietly slipped by, so too did many of the beloved faces that once brought that world to life. Some left us in heartbreaking silence. Others faded from view, carrying private struggles behind closed doors. Today, we revisit the cast who made Mayberry unforgettable, to remember those we've lost, to honor those who remain, and to celebrate a legacy that still warms hearts across generations. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's begin this journey back to where it all began. Don Knotts as Barney Fe. Don Knotts, born on July 21, 1924, took on the role of Deputy Barney Fe in The Andy Griffith Show when he was 36 years old. The character of Barney, nervous, bumbling, and famously carrying only one bullet in his shirt pocket, was not only the comedic soul of Mayberry, but also won Knotts 5 prestigious Emmy Awards. Yet behind the stage lights, his real life was a series of personal losses, psychological struggles, and a lingering loneliness that followed him to the end. Growing up in a poor family in West Virginia, Don was the youngest child of an alcoholic father suffering from mental illness. His father often threatened him with a knife, creating an atmosphere of terror that turned Don into a quiet, withdrawn child. His father died when Don was just 13, leaving him to live in a shabby boarding house with his mother and 3 brothers. Those early wounds became the emotional wellspring of his anxious yet hilarious characters later in life. Don once said he didn't play Barney, he was Barney. His brilliant career couldn't fix his unstable personal life. Knotts went through 3 marriages, 2 of which ended in divorce. He raised his daughter as a single father, but was haunted by feelings of inadequacy. Friends described him as a sweet but insecure man, always worrying about his health and self-worth. As he aged, he became increasingly reclusive. Macular degeneration left him nearly blind, forcing him to give up stage and television and live his final years in near total darkness. On February 24, 2006, Don Knotts died in Los Angeles due to pneumonia complications linked to lung cancer. He was 81 years old. He was laid to rest at Westwood Memorial Park, the same cemetery where his close friend and co-star John Ritter would later be buried, a man Knotts considered a surrogate son. A bronze memorial plaque was added years later, etched with images of his most famous roles, including Barney, the lifelong companion, and the mask he never truly took off. His net worth at the time of his death was estimated around $20 million, the reward for decades spent bringing joy to others. Andy Griffith as Andy Taylor. Andy Samuel Griffith was born on June 1, 1926, in Mount Airy, North Carolina, a small town that later inspired Mayberry, where he portrayed Sheriff Andy Taylor in The Andy Griffith Show. When he took on the role in 1960, Griffith was just 34 years old, but his warm Southern voice and calm, upright demeanor instantly turned him into a national television icon throughout the show's 8-season run. Griffith's on-screen success stood in stark contrast to his turbulent and painful private life. His first marriage to Barbara Bray Edwards seemed solid for over 2 decades, but ended in divorce in 1972. They adopted 2 children, including Andy Jr., a son who brought Griffith both pride and unimaginable grief. Andy Jr. fell into alcoholism at a young age, and Griffith tried repeatedly to save him from destruction, but every attempt failed. In 1996, Andy Jr. died alone at the age of 38. His death devastated Griffith deeply. Griffith's health began to seriously decline in the early 1980s. In 1983, he was suddenly paralyzed from the knees down due to Guillain-Barré syndrome. For 7 months, he relied on a wheelchair and endured painful physical therapy to regain movement. During what seemed like the twilight of his career, he landed the role of Ben Matlock, a seasoned lawyer from Georgia in Matlock, a character that not only revived his fame, but also brought immense financial success, allowing him to build a peaceful life afterward. Behind the ever-smiling TV persona were long periods of tension. After 2 failed marriages, Griffith found a final haven with Cindy Knight, his 3rd wife, nearly 3 decades younger. Though life with Cindy brought some balance, The memories of struggling with illness, broken marriages, and his son's death never faded. Close friends said that behind the scenes, he would often sit in silence for hours, as if burdened by an unspeakable sorrow. It was later revealed that during Matlock, Griffith was still mourning his son and worrying about the heart that had undergone bypass surgery in 2000. On July 3, 2012, Andy Griffith passed away at his home on Roanoke Island, North Carolina after a heart attack. He was 86 years old. Per his wishes, no funeral was held, and he was buried just 5 hours after his death. At the time, his estate was estimated at around $60 million, a reflection of both his talent and his sacrifices. Howard McNeer as Floyd Lawson. Howard Turbill. McNeer was born on January 27, 1905, and joined the Andy Griffith Show when he was 55 years old, portraying Floyd Lawson, the quirky, chatty, yet friendly barber of Mayberry. With his signature stammering voice and never-ending rambling stories, he became one of the most beloved supporting characters on the show. But behind that humorous exterior was a tragic journey marked by illness and heartbreak until his final breath. McNeer had already built a brilliant career in radio, most notably as Doc Adams in the radio version of Gunsmoke. But his television peak came with the role of Floyd on The Andy Griffith Show. In 1963, however, McNeer suffered a major stroke that left the left side of his body paralyzed. It seemed his career had ended until Andy Griffith himself insisted on bringing him back to the set, even though McNeer could no longer stand. From that point on, viewers only saw Floyd seated on a bench holding a newspaper in his left hand, while his right hand continued acting out the rest of his life with quiet determination. Despite his brave return, the after effects of the stroke worsened. He gradually lost the ability to memorize lines, became panicked during tapings, and ultimately had to leave the show in 1967. In his final appearances, he was filmed sitting in a car or shot from a distance. Off camera, he frequently suffered emotional breakdowns, haunted by the feeling that he was no longer himself. Howard McNeer passed away on January 3, 1969, just weeks before his 64th birthday at the Veterans Hospital in California. The cause of death was pneumonia, a complication stemming from the earlier stroke. He died quietly, leaving behind his wife Helen and son Christopher, as well as a character etched forever in the memories of millions. Jim Nabors as Goomer Pyle. James Thurston. Nabors was born on June 12, 1930 in Sylacauga, Alabama. When he first appeared on The Andy Griffith Show as the dim-witted but endearing gas station attendant Goomer Pyle, he was already 32 years old. A Southern outsider with a heart of gold and a voice that would soon surprise the world. Originally hired for a one-off appearance in 1962, Nabors' portrayal was so beloved by audiences that his character quickly became a series regular and eventually earned his own spin-off, Goomer Pyle, USMC. Though best known for his wide-eyed innocence and signature catchphrase, Golly Jim Nabors was far more than just a comic relief. Behind the exaggerated accent and goofy persona was a man of great sensitivity, hidden sorrow, and extraordinary musical talent. From a young age, Nabors struggled with severe asthma, which kept him from participating in most childhood sports. Instead, he turned to music and performance, eventually earning a degree in business administration from the University of Alabama. He moved to Los Angeles and worked as a typist at a television station, performing in small nightclubs at night, where he was eventually discovered by Andy Griffith himself. But even with rising fame, Nabors remained painfully aware of the pressures he faced. He was a gay man living in a time when Hollywood and the world demanded silence. For decades, he kept his private life hidden from the public eye, fearing exposure could destroy his career. Rumors about his sexuality circulated widely, including a fabricated story that he had secretly married actor Rock Hudson, which both denied. Though untrue, the gossip highlighted how isolated and cautious Jim had to be, even while surrounded by adoring fans. In 1975, Jim moved to Hawaii, where he found peace and privacy in a plantation-style home in Honolulu. There, he met Stan Cadwallader, a former firefighter who would become his life partner for nearly 4 decades. Though they lived quietly and discreetly for most of their relationship, Jim and Stan were finally able to legally marry in 2013, shortly after same-sex marriage became legal in Washington state. In his final years, Neighbors battled various health issues, including a liver transplant in 1994. Yet he never lost his gentleness, his love of music, or his appreciation for the fans who had stood by him all his life. On November 30th, 2017, Jim Neighbors passed away peacefully at his home in Honolulu at the age of 87. The world lost a man who had once made it laugh through simplicity and tenderness, and who had quietly endured life's heaviest burdens with dignity and grace. George Lindsay as Goober Pyle. George Smith. Lindsay was born on December 17, 1928 in Alabama, and stepped into the role of Goober Pyle in The Andy Griffith Show in 1964 when he was 35 years old, wearing overalls, a gas station cap, and flashing a goofy but sincere grin. Goober, the slow but sweet mechanic, became a comedic icon in American pop culture across generations. But when the studio lights faded, Lindsay's real life proved to be a path marked by contradictions and disappointment. Lindsay once dreamed of becoming a physical education teacher, but fate led him to the stage and screen. After serving in the Air Force and graduating from the American Theater Wing in New York, he pursued Broadway and was even briefly considered for the role of Mr. Spock on Star Trek. But destiny locked him into one name, Goober. The role that brought him fame also became a cage he couldn't escape. Lindsay openly expressed frustration that Hollywood never gave him more serious roles and resented being typecast as the lovable dummy for decades. His personal life was no less complicated. His 36-year marriage to Joanne Herbert ended in divorce in 1991. Though he had 2 children and 2 grandchildren, Lindsay spent his final years in solitude. His only steady companion during this time was businesswoman Ann Wilson, who remained by his side until the end. Behind the comedic mask was a weary heart that had battled heart disease for years before he passed away on May 6, 2012 in Nashville. He was 83 years old. Despite his regrets, Lindsay left behind a legacy of compassion. He donated over $1 million to the Alabama Special Olympics, established scholarships, hosted film festivals, and became a local hero in Jasper, where a road was named in his honor. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at just $2 million, but what he left behind was a warm heart beneath the humor. Frances Bavier as Aunt B. Frances Elizabeth Bavier was born on December 14, 1902 in New York City and stepped into the role of Aunt B in The Andy Griffith Show when she was 58 years old, a role that defined her name for an entire decade from 1960 to 1970. Her portrayal of the sweet, strict, and loving aunt in Mayberry seemed like a perfect reflection of herself. But behind the warm smile was a life filled with contradictions, regret, and a quiet descent into solitude. Originally a Broadway actress who once performed alongside Henry Fonda Bavier, took great pride in her craft. However, after transitioning to television and becoming Aunt B, she quickly found herself typecast. She once painfully admitted being an actress known for only one role is very frustrating. This inner conflict made her sensitive and defensive on set. She often clashed with Andy Griffith, creating tension during production. It wasn't until 4 months before her death that she called him to apologize, admitting she had been difficult, and that the role had overshadowed her real self. Bavier's private life was equally bittersweet. She never married, had no children, and spent her later years completely reclusive in Siler City, North Carolina, where she bought a small house after retiring from show business in 1972. Locals rarely saw her. She was known only as a distant elderly woman who lived with more than a dozen cats and avoided all public attention. Yet few knew she had left behind a $100,000 trust for the Siler City Police Force, a quiet but deeply meaningful act of gratitude. Frances's final years were marked by severe illness and loneliness. She was hospitalized in November 1989 with multiple serious conditions: congestive heart failure, heart attack, breast cancer, and COPD. Just 2 days after being released, she passed away at her home on December 6, 1989, only 8 days before her 87th birthday. Her estate was estimated at around $700,000, a modest sum for someone so famous, reflecting the simple life she chose after fame. Bert Mustin as Judd Fletcher. Bert Mustin wasn't just a familiar face in the Andy Griffith Show. He was the embodiment of timeless wisdom, warm smiles and twinkling eyes that felt like they had seen a century's worth of stories. Born on February 8, 1884 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Mustin didn't step in front of a camera until he was 67 years old. Yet somehow he would go on to appear in over 150 television shows and films, becoming one of Hollywood's most beloved late-blooming character actors. He portrayed Judd Fletcher in The Andy Griffith Show, a kindly, slightly scatterbrained old man who always had a friendly word and a dose of quirky Mayberry charm. But Judd was only one of many roles Mustin brought to life in Mayberry. He would appear in multiple episodes as different characters, always portraying the same lovable elderly neighbor who never seemed out of place. His appearances were brief, but they stuck, and fans remember him fondly to this day. What makes Bert Mustin's story so remarkable isn't just his work on screen, but the life he lived before Hollywood even noticed him. For most of his life, Bert worked as an insurance salesman and car dealer. He was a proud graduate of the Pennsylvania Military College in 1903, and he sang in barbershop quartets, participated in community theater, and remained active in civic life throughout his career. Acting wasn't a dream deferred, it was a dream born late. It wasn't until 1951, at the age of 67, that he appeared in his first film, Detective Story, alongside Kirk Douglas. From that moment, Hollywood couldn't get enough of him. Casting directors loved his genuine demeanor, his wrinkled smile, and the soft, grandfatherly voice that seemed like it had drifted in from a better time. He became a regular in nearly every major sitcom of the 1950s to 1970s, from Leave It to Beaver to The Twilight Zone, from All in the Family to Dragnet. Despite his growing fame, Mustin never let celebrity alter his simple way of life. He remained humble, punctual, and deeply grateful for the opportunity to work. Friends described him as a consummate gentleman, always arriving on set with a pocket watch, neatly dressed, and ready with a kind word. He once said, "I didn't get into this business until I was old enough to enjoy it without the ego." That humility made him a favorite of both crews and audiences alike. Unlike many in the business, Bert Mustin never sought the spotlight. It simply found him. He never married, had no children, and poured his love into performance and friendship. Even in his 80s and early 90s, he continued acting with tireless energy, appearing in commercials and guest spots until his final months. On January 28, 1977, just 11 days before his 93rd birthday, Bert Mustin passed away at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital in Woodland Hills, California. He died peacefully in his sleep after a brief illness, having lived a life fuller in his final decades than many do in their entire youth. Annette Corsall as Helen Crump. Annette Corsall was born on November 3, 1933 in Hutchinson, Kansas. When she was 30 years old, she played the refined schoolteacher Helen Crump in The Andy Griffith Show. Few knew that behind her poised image was a private, quiet life filled with hidden pain and a forbidden relationship that often tore at both her heart and career. An honors student at Northwestern and a disciple of acting legend Lee Strasberg Corsall left academia to pursue performance. She debuted alongside Steve McQueen in the horror film The Blob, 1958. But it wasn't until she took the role of Helen Crump in 1963 that she truly stepped into the spotlight, yet that light came with heavy shadows. According to the posthumous biography, Andy and Dawn Corsall had a 5-year extramarital affair with co-star Andy Griffith while he was still married. Unlike many stars of her era, Annette never married, had no children, and lived alone all her life. She avoided scandal, kept her private life guarded, and devoted herself to the arts. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, she appeared in Adam 12 Matlock General Hospital and other shows, but no role ever surpassed the legacy of Helen Crump. Her sensitive, often conflicted spirit led friends to describe her as a woman of silence and depth. In 1995, at the age of 62, she passed away quietly from lung cancer. There was no farewell message, no public will, and no clear account of who stood beside her in her final days. She was laid to rest at Valhalla Memorial Park in North Hollywood, in the same quiet, graceful, and enigmatic manner in which she had lived. Betty Lynn as Thelma Lou. Betty Lynn was born on August 29, 1926, in Kansas City, Missouri. She portrayed the gentle and ideal girlfriend Thelma Lou to Barney Fe in The Andy Griffith Show when she stepped into the role in 1961 when she was 35 years old. But audiences had no idea that the woman who smiled so sweetly on screen had grown up in a childhood filled with turbulence. Her parents separated early, and her mother once had to hide in a closet while pregnant to escape her abusive husband. That trauma left a lasting mark, and Betty was raised by her grandparents, almost completely severing ties with her biological father. That early heartbreak drove her toward the arts as a place of refuge. Even after being signed by 20th Century Fox and acting alongside Bette Davis, Betty never felt secure. She once said, "I was a red-headed girl with freckles and no bust. I just prayed they'd keep hiring me." That insecurity followed her throughout her career, even after finding success as Thelma Lou, a role she loved so much she didn't want to leave it. But even though she played a lead character for 5 years, she appeared in only 26 episodes due to contractual commitments to another series. In real life, Betty never married, though she was once engaged before quietly calling it off. She bought a house in Los Angeles to live with her mother and grandparents, becoming the financial and emotional backbone of the family. Because of this, she turned down many major roles to care for her loved ones, sacrificing the spotlight to preserve a fragile home. Even so, she managed to make a living through TV royalties and fan events tied to the Andy Griffith Show, eventually amassing a net worth estimated around $3 million. As old age approached, Betty left the bustling city of Los Angeles and moved to Mount Airy, the hometown of Andy Griffith, as a symbolic return to the Mayberry in her heart. There, she became a living icon of classic television, appearing monthly at the Andy Griffith Museum, signing autographs, telling stories, and sharing Thelma Lou's sincere love with new generations. She passed away peacefully on October 16, 2021, at the age of 95 while still working on her memoir. Jack Dodson as Howard Sprague. Jack Dodson was born on May 16, 1931, and became a well-known face to American TV audiences through his role as Howard Sprague on The Andy Griffith Show. When he took on the role in 1966, he was 35 years old and gave the character a shy, sincere depth, portraying a lonely, awkward man amid the simple charm of Mayberry. Few realized that behind that natural performance was a devoted, introspective artist, quietly carrying private pain. Jack's personal life was far from peaceful. He married art director Mary Dodson in 1959, and they remained together for 35 years until his death. Their marriage was described by colleagues as quiet but profound, a rare love in the entertainment world. Yet it was that very love that made his final years heavier, especially after he was diagnosed with cancer. Dodson kept his illness hidden from both family and the public, continuing to perform in television and theater until his final months, as if clinging to unfinished dreams. As the illness progressed, he refused invasive treatments, not wanting to become a burden to his wife. When he died in Los Angeles on September 16, 1994, at the age of 63, many close friends only then learned he had been silently battling cancer for over 2 years. His death stunned the television community, not only for the loss of a familiar face, but for his quiet endurance and unwavering dedication to the craft until the very end. Hope Summers as Clara Edwards. Sarah Hope Summers was born on June 7, 1902, and became a seasoned actress beloved for her portrayal of Clara Edwards, the kind and curious neighbor in The Andy Griffith Show. When she took on the role in 1961, she was already 59 years old, quite a late age to gain fame in television. Yet with her gentle manner, kind eyes, and quintessentially rural American voice, Hope turned Clara into an unforgettable figure in Mayberry. Hope's personal life wasn't particularly dramatic, but it was quietly marked by long-lasting sorrow. After marrying businessman Claude Witherell in 1927 and having 2 children, what seemed like a perfect life ended with his sudden death. She became a widow in silence, raising her children with great sacrifice and a deep belief in the arts. In later interviews, even as her career blossomed, she often avoided discussing her private life. Few would have guessed that this former speech teacher from an intellectual family in Illinois would pursue acting into her senior years. She broke into film late, first credited in 0 Hour in 1957 at age 55, followed by dozens of delightful supporting roles in more than 30 television shows. She was also cherished for voicing Mrs. Butterworth in a long-running series of commercials for nearly 2 decades. But even faith can't hold back time forever. By the mid-1970s, she began experiencing symptoms of heart failure, though she continued working until she physically could not. On June 22, 1979, Hope Summers passed away at the age of 77 quietly, just like the way she had always appeared on screen. The legacy of The Andy Griffith Show lives on in the hearts of its fans, where the laughter and lessons from Mayberry continue to shine. Which character was your favorite? Share your memories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from classic television.